Welcome back to Sean's Thoughts. I hope you're having a wonderful June 5th today. And before I commence any further with this particular podcast, I would love to say happy birthday to my former partner. Today is her birthday and she'll be celebrating it. And I truly wish her the absolute best possible day that she could have on this beautiful, beautiful June 5th day. So happy birthday. And yeah, best wishes and blessings for you. So, thank you so much for joining your attention with mine today. My name is Sean, and I'm the host of Sean's Thoughts. It's a play on words where I just essentially talk about all that's on my mind. And, well, today, what's on my mind is essentially the idea that we are all on our own journeys. And I think this is a very valid conversation, especially when we see how many different versions of the journey are there and available for us to essentially, discuss. See, before I get into this, I kind of want to share a little bit about what I have come to understand of what we are. And when I mean we, I mean the me, the you, the I, the them, the everyone else, all those other projections or souls that are out there. See, I've come to understand that we are all perspectives, is the word that was used. Some people have used the word aspects, and you can definitely get into, you know, f- getting down to what words really mean. But nonetheless, for this particular talk, I'll use the word perspectives because perspectives is kind of just like if you imagine a large diamond or a large jewel, and perspectives could simply be looked upon as the multiple faces. So if you're going to take a jewel and you're going to carve it up and like sculpt it, you could put in a billion faces on that jewel. And that's how I would perceive that we're all perspectives of God, of Source, and that we're all having a unique individual journey. And then through that, God is able to experience thus what we experience. And I've come to understand that perhaps that is the way, or, more in alignment with what is we are experiencing now. And so with that being said, it would definitely, align with the idea that we are all on our own individual journeys and we're all stepping through different experiences and going through different trials and tribulations that yet at the same time we're also experiencing many different rewards and great possibilities of what could be, and maybe I don't know. Anyways, I was just taking off my shoes. Welcome. My name is Sean, as I said, and today we are going to talk about, as I said, that we're all on different paths. And I had this idea that I was going to walk in behind the trees while I talk about this, but, I realize now I just took off my shoes. And so I'm grounding right now amongst these really large trees that have this amazing out bark on it. If you notice on this type of tree, the bark is quite like very, very old. And I notice a lot of the trees in this park, they have this older bark. And sorry, I got a hair in my mouth. And when I'm going into the forests, I noticed that there's several trees. Oftentimes, it'll have this really thick bark around them, and yet the trees around them might be less, more of the thinner bark, as if they were the shoots. And so, this particular park is in the middle of downtown Hope. I'm back here again. Yes, I love this place. Amazing energy, and all of these trees have that thicker bark upon them. So it makes me believe that, the trees that are older usually will have the reinforced bark, perhaps. But back onto the topic that I wanted to share with you today, and that was, the realization or perhaps the awareness that we all have our individual unique paths to journey on. And, those paths often they do intertwine or even intersect. That means they come together, sometimes for moments and sometimes for, an entire marriage. And yet at times those paths are able to break apart, but yet we have been led into this idea that, happily ever after, forever type of deal. And so even when we enter into the agreement of a marriage, there has been a program perhaps or an idea. Maybe it was spawned by Disney movies or, the way that the contractual obligations of, government style marriages, that we enter into these agreements with the idea that it's going to be forever. And yet oftentimes we find ourselves changing, and we find ourselves learning new things and meeting new people. And oftentimes, the whole idea is that if we are all on our own paths, then eventually those paths may come to a completion. And I use the word completion rather than the word end because things don't necessarily end. There's just a reviewing or a rebranding of that particular relationship, and keeping ourselves open to the possibility that there are ebbs and flows, even to allow for relationships to become something new. I've often talked about that of, even those relationships that we had in our past that were foundationally affected or disturbed or distorted through, frictions and outside interference, that those relationships do too have the possibility to, of course, be reknown, be reseen in a new light, especially when we're able to release all of the traumas that perhaps, you know, bundled up, or, there got to be too many of them based on common reoccurrences or common situations. But yet, when we move out into the world and we release all that's behind us, oftentimes it'll allow us to be, a new person, a new version of ourselves, someone that perhaps those people, those other relationships that we once had no longer even, well, remember, or they have changed so much. See, part of what I've been going through on this journey, and this, especially this last few weeks, is releasing a lot of the things that didn't serve me. And a lot of those things that didn't serve me were things that I was essentially holding on to. Even when I left a lot of my belongings that behind. And a lot of these things were trinkets and little figurines and a lot of photographs as well, realizing that that was an older version of me. And as we move forward and the paths, they start to diverge between the person that I once was versus the person that I am now, those things no longer hold relevance. There are many things, of course, that are important to hold on to within heart, and that's all essentially love. And love connects us, even if our paths have diverged to, be more space between us. Space and time essentially being an illusion of the matrix, as I understand it. And, quantum reality saying that if we're ever together, we're always together. But yet the physical form of our journey would have paths that are going up a mountain. And while we're all on the path towards the same objective, perhaps in this lifetime or future ones to come, nonetheless, we're all going towards that same thing. See, I've often came to the realization that when I was living my life, if people that, I felt close to, or relationships that I once had, if they weren't, you know, available, the phone calls didn't get picked up or didn't get returned, or the messages didn't get returned, or whatever things like that had happened, I suddenly came to the realization that perhaps that person had simply fallen out of alignment with me at that moment, meaning they were unable to connect with me for many different reasons. Perhaps it was synchronicity, perhaps they were in a spot where they were unable to, you know, even answer the phone or even call back because they didn't feel up to it. But yet, it's almost as if when we walk through our own paths, our own life, our own journeys, and those people that we do come across, that somehow in that moment that we do have that resonant frequency in which we can make connections. I'm sitting in a park right now and I'm wondering how many people are truly in my frequency, my resonant frequency. And I say that though, even though they populate the park, that perhaps they are, not available for me. For instance, I went to a little sandy beach cove in Harrison Hot Springs, and there was a dog and a woman who was working on her computer. And the dog came up to me and, it wrapped it's like pushed up against my legs. It wanted me to pet it. Like it definitely was in my frequency. And yet the woman who was working on a computer, well, she just kept calling her dog back, trying to get her dog to stay away from me, apologizing, but still kept calling the dog back. And she really had no interest in speaking. Or perhaps I didn't, who knows? But my point is that although the dog was in my frequency and it was interacting and engaging with me, she wasn't. And she kept trying to get the dog to, stay away. And, this could be for numerous reasons. Perhaps they have or she has an idea or a fear of, a random person coming and, showing up in the exact same small sandy cove beach that you had to essentially hike for 25 minutes to get to from Harrison Hot Springs. So my point being is that we all are on our own journey, but yet we all are doing it together. And see, that's the important part. So many times I hear people say to me, "Oh, we all have our own journey," as if there's a way to dismiss, why people are doing things differently. See, because while I believe we are all on our own journey and we all have our own past, our own challenges, our own trials, our own lessons, our own experiences, we are doing it together. And so we, in a sense, are sharing this experience. And, together we are sharing this perspective, our each individual perspectives with our creator. And our creator is simply, or not simply, but essentially growing through our experiences. That even the act of love is that direct connection with God, with source, with our creator, however it is you choose to label. And therefore, it's more of, in how I imagine it anyways, as a ripple of, experiences and the things that we go while we're on our path. The stronger we ripple, perhaps it magnetizes or draws in those people. See, our words, our experiences, our thoughts, our actions, everything holds a vibration. And that vibration can be, very high and vibrating and powerful, like compassion and love. Just imagine, for example, you walk into a room where people are fighting. Well, oftentimes when that happens, at least for me, I can feel that. I don't know why it's suddenly getting windy now. I can feel that. And it somewhat repulses, it somewhat pushes away. You can feel that darkness over the area. But yet, if that same room has had lovemaking or happy vibrations, or the people that are in it are very cheerful, their energy is considerably different. So even though that we are all on our own paths, when we, come into contact with one another, when our paths converge, and as I said, it can be for a day, a month, a week, a year, 2 years. This actually goes into my idea that perhaps in the future we could look at redefining how we treat our intimate relationships. That rather than looking at as, getting married forever and building a life together, that we could recognize that, every experience we have is a moment in time. So perhaps the experience is more of, well, I would like to live with you, or I would like to reside with you for now, and keep that relationship completely authentic and in truth, talking about how you feel perhaps all along the way. And when it comes time for, relationships to diverge, there's more of a release, as opposed to, an argument that turns violent and people break up. Like, breaking up doesn't necessarily have to be how paths divide. Of course, that we do have situations where we learn from those breakups, but perhaps moving forward, especially if we're going to remain in a higher vibration or a higher state of alignment to whatever it is that we are, that we can find better ways to release. And essentially, that is by practicing our awareness more often, being aware that things aren't always forever. There's that saying that this too shall pass. And there's an awesome story that Ram Dass talks about when these beings had given this ring to this guy, and it gave him a really good feeling of positivity, and realizing that this too shall pass, meaning that the negative moments or the trials and tribulations we have, this too shall pass. And yet, so are those amazing experiences that we have. This too shall pass because, if you don't let the old go, and the old being those positive and those negative, if you want to speak within the moments of polarity, those good and bad, those highs and lows, if we don't release those, then we haven't made space for all of the good and the lessons and trials that are to come. And so perhaps that is a greater understanding of the awareness of, allowing to make space for all the new experiences that are on the horizon. Recognizing that our paths do cross, they do become parallel. So we are at sometimes, the same space. And yet recognizing also that many people are behind or in front of, that they're all on their own journeys, and not just that they're behind as if there's some sort of race to get to the finish line. I mean that some people are working on other lessons, and they're not necessarily having everyone work on all of the same lessons at the same time. I'm realizing now as I look at my camera that perhaps I haven't even been in the picture at all, but who knows? These videos that I do, I like just, being free and sharing and talking even amongst the trees, because as I said, our vibration, our words, our, you know, just our being has an energy attached to it. And as we spend time more in nature and more living in an organic life and being in a loving state of mind, well, the overall better I find that, life can be. Because if we're in an open state of mind, even when challenges and trials come up and the essentially, you know, try to teach us, when we're more available to listen to the lesson and deal with it, not deal with it, but, engage and solve it, then we're able to learn that lesson much faster. And I find that being out in nature and not being in an environment where there's so much noise and chaos, that it allows for exponential growth. So if you are looking for a way to perhaps heal or, just connect with your inner thoughts, often walking into the forest or even just walking outside, but the forest would definitely be better, with your shoes off, for example, hugging a tree, taking those moments to listen to the birds chirping, or even just laying back in the wind and, allowing the grass to catch yourself. Those definitely would help in finding that unique path that is yours. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think that it really does explain or edify the idea that it's okay for us to be on our own paths, and it's okay for us to, you know, connect with those that we connect with, and then, you know, depart or diverge, because we never ever know when our paths are going to essentially connect again. So rather than leaving things in a state of disharmony, releasing, letting go, and allowing for something new to be created. And, the idea of not burning bridges, that's, I guess, an important function as well. So, yeah, I hope that you are all having an amazing time as I am. And, the world is changing and we're all on our own various paths, but yet we're all going to get up to the same mountain, to the same mountain peak, and we're all going to reach towards our creator. So, thank you so much for sharing this Sean's Thoughts episode with me. I'm available on so many podcast playlists platforms right now, from Apple to Spotify to Amazon to Audible to Boom Player and a couple other ones that I haven't fully checked out yet, as well as Podbean, Rumble, and YouTube. That's a lot of places to find this. And I hope that you will share if you're called to, because it definitely will help us expedite this magnificent journey that we're on. And if you're always looking for something that you can do, if you feel that, well, what can I do? Well, when you find content, and it's not just mine, but whoever it is, share it loud and proud and trust that it will find the people that it requires. And as always, I encourage you to go on and listen to my Moving Portraits podcast. You'll find that on YouTube exclusive. And it's a great podcast called Changing Stations with Shone. I highly encourage everyone to, mostly because I would love to see that playlist hit like 1 billion views. And definitely let YouTube know that my podcasts, and I now have 8 of them, that they're here to stay, and I'm here to grow like this tree right here. So, with that being said, thank you so much. I definitely will be connecting with you very soon. I'm actually going to be redoing my podcast about open borders coming soon for my Possibilities podcast, because I actually did it here when it was windy and I found that the wind created a lot of distortions. And so I'm going to re-record that coming soon, as well as my other 2 podcasts for Sean Thoughts that I have been delaying until the moment is right. And I feel definitely that the moment will be right coming very soon. So thank you so much. I anticipate, look forward to, however it is, all the comments, any of the comments, and together we can create a new world to step into together. And together is the key. Take all those paths, bundle them all up in a group of like twig likes, and then they will not be able to be broken. And we will have the world that we choose to live in, which I think is of the utmost importance, of course, along with the divine plan of God, the source of all. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and so much love. And for all those other people who are having a birthday out there today as well, happy birthday. Happy June 5th and happy new earth coming soon. It's already here, actually.